Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 439 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. This is a Rambling Reflections from the Road podcast. I'm on my way to Ottawa, Ontario, to attend CanCon, which is a science fiction and fantasy conference. But CanCon is the topic of this Rambling Reflection, specifically Canadian content. Now, this episode is going to be a relatively short one as I do my rambling reflection on the road, and I do apologize for the noise. I simply ran out of time to get an interview edited, and so we're going to get this one done so I don't miss my Friday episode. This episode is sponsored by a new book that was just released this week. It's actually a second edition of a book that I co-authored with Maddie Dalrymple. Now, Maddie is going to be my guest in next week's episode. We had done this interview several months back, and this interview is about our book on creating connections and community and income from short fiction. That's the subtitle, or a rough bastardization of the subtitle for our book, Taking the Short Tack. This is the second edition, and we've made some significant changes to this book and added in a whole bunch of things that have changed, or new things that exist for writers, and further examples of how different writers, including Maddie and myself, have leveraged short fiction in our writing quiver, in the tools and the strategies that we employ as writers. And following this rambling reflection, just because it's easier to edit this way once I get to the hotel room in Ottawa, you'll hear a bit of an ad for that. It's sort of a sampler that we had created via Notebook LM, and I'm going to be doing a special episode on Notebook LM, probably for my patrons first, and then I'll release it to the general public shortly after that, maybe a month or two after that. Sort of a bit of a walkthrough of how you can leverage Google's Notebook LM for some marketing support and even some other great things that you can do, including this auto-generated interview, which you'll hear at the end of this episode. But let's get into the main content for CanCon and why I want to talk about this. So I am on my way to Ottawa, Ontario. I'm recording this on Friday, October 17th, and CanCon, can-con.org is the website. And this is, again, science fiction and fantasy conference. It's an award-winning conference that takes place in Ottawa. Now, this is a newer iteration of CanCon, but actually, and this is important to me, the very first science fiction conference I ever went to, right, as a writer and sat on a panel, was actually CanCon in Ottawa. And I was so excited to be there. That was my first foray into science fiction and fantasy conferences, and I was even involved with the people who started the original CanCon.
There's construction ahead.
And I even helped edit. There was a magazine initially that was CanCon, and the whole idea, and I'll get to this in a bit, was in the greater world of things, we in Canada are dominated by the presence of the U.S. It's such a much larger country, population-wise at least, and a lot of the influences that we have in media, and particularly literature, science fiction, fantasy, are coming from the U.S. and the U.K. We're sort of kind of caught between those two realms in our Commonwealth guise. But this CanCon was meant to be a Canadian a journal that was looking at Canadian content. So there were reviews of Canadian authored science fiction and fantasy books, even though most of them were being published by American or UK publishers, for example. And so I hit some weird button just to make sure I was still recording, and I was starting again, and I'm not sure where I got cut off and how I got cut off, but that happens in one of these rambling reflections. But in any case, what the heck was I rambling on about? I think I was talking about speculative literature. And I use the term speculative literature as an all-encompassing term, because speculative is what science fiction, fantasy, and horror is. It's sort of that literature of what if, and it explores questions related to either science what ifs, either fantasy what ifs, or either horror what ifs, at least in my mind. So when I use the term speculative literature, it's really, or speculative, fiction, it's really all-encompassing for science fiction, fantasy, and horror. But in any case, that's what the CanCon conference is about, and I love going to it, and I kind of missed going for a few years since I moved out away from Ottawa. I missed it for a few years. It kind of, I think it shut down for a few years, and I came back. But I've returned to it probably half a dozen times since it's come back, and I'm so glad when I'm able to fit it in. Now, ironically, there were other events taking place back home in Waterloo that I'm going to miss. Cambridge Writers Group would put together some reading events and stuff like that, but you can't be in two places at once. Although, ironically, I am in two places at once this weekend, because I'm speaking later today. I'm recording this at 9:40 a.m. In the morning. I'm on the highway, and I'm doing my talk is at 5 p.m. today about partnering with libraries and loving and leveraging your libraries, I think, is the title of the presentation, which I did put together last night. By about midnight, I had it done. And but I'm also participating virtually in Self-PubCon 2025, put on by the Alliance of Independent Authors. It's a free conference that starts today, Friday, October 17th, and then the 18th and the 19th. You can register for free. I'll have a link in the show notes for that. And for that one, because I was already booked into this physical event, I pre-recorded my talk, which is kind of like a look at how new trends in print for indie authors and what's going on in that realm. So that's pre-recorded, and that's going to be at noon tomorrow on October 12th. And again, I'll have a link in the show notes. But again, you can't be in two places at once, but sometimes you can be in two places at once. And I'm so gracious that the Alliance of Independent Authors allowed me to do that virtual presentation. Now, it is possible. I mean, at the time, I didn't know my schedule and when I was going to be on stage in Ottawa. But I was worried about being able to try to do the presentation from hotel Wi-Fi, which I have done before and is sometimes inconsistent. So better to have it pre-recorded and locked and loaded. And so I'm going to see if there's an opportunity, for answering live questions, etc. There's a forum as well where I can engage and interact with people, because I don't think I'm on till later on in the day. Anyways, the reason, another thing just to ramble on about, the reason that I am driving this morning and not last night, normally I would have gotten in because the conference is already, I guess, started or starts later this morning, and it's about a 5+ hour drive to Ottawa from the Waterloo area, at least this time of day, and the highway I'm taking. But one of the reasons I didn't go last night was, well, I wanted to spend some time with Liz. We've both been very busy with our respective work, and last night, because I was at an event in Brantford, I did a talk about writing ghost stories and researching the paranormal, etc. at Brantford Library, an hour and a half talk on Wednesday night. I didn't see her that night. We've just been so busy with post-work. Post-work day work, which is pretty common for me and very common for her as well with the stuff that she has to do as a K-6 principal. But anyways, I at least had a quick dinner with her last night before I went off to my Citizens Police Academy, and I've already missed two. Sadly, I already missed the second and third weeks of this. It's every Thursday night from 7 till 10 p.m. And I know I'm going to miss at least two more actually in November, because I'm going to be in Vegas, but I'm also going to be back at the Brantford Library interviewing Samantha M. Bailey on stage talking about her amazing thriller writers. Speaking of Canadian content again. But I didn't want to miss this this one. And we did organized crime and gangs. We talked about Crime Stoppers, and we talked as well about vehicle theft and break-in, entry, and robbery. And I shared a story about my skeleton. How my skeleton that got stolen from my house 2 years ago, how it actually foiled car thieves. And I did share that in a personal update years ago. But if you want to know more, let me know. Ping me, and I'll share that story about how a skeleton that got stolen by these two corrupt car thieves, known to police, how the fact that they stole my skeleton is what led to their arrest, which I think is so amazing. So I brought my skeleton, which is still in the evidence bag, captured to share with it's not like kind of show and tell with my classmates and with the instructors, etc. But again, like I said, this is a rambling reflection. So because that class was from 7 till 10 p.m. last night, my option was, I guess at 10 p.m. I could have done the drive into Ottawa, but I thought it'd be better to try to get a full night's sleep, or close to a full night's sleep. I got roughly 5 hours of sleep, and then get on the highway and get to Ottawa. I was hoping to get there before noon. It's looking like I'll get there around 1 p.m., but that still gives me a few hours to get checked in, to load this episode, to load this episode to production, and also get checked into the conference and stuff like that, and then get ready to do my presentation at 5 p.m. So I do have a few hour leeway, and hopefully I don't encounter. So far, I'm 3 hours away, so 2 hours into my drive, and I was enjoying Terry Follis's book, which is amazing, The Marionette. I'll have a link to it, Terry's website, and the show notes, and episodes where I've interviewed Terry in the past as well. I'm gonna have to have him come back on the podcast. But 3 hours to go to get to Ottawa for this conference. I'm looking forward to it. And as I just get merged off of one highway and onto another, I'm near Peterborough now. I want to talk a little bit about CanCon in general and the concept of CanCon. So, in relation to the magazine, I talked about the Canadian Journal of Canadian Content and Speculative Literature. I think that's what the initial guise of the journal was, and then the conference was born out of that. The reason we focus on this, and this is it's so pertinent in Canadian literature studies, and I took classes in university, Canadian literature, is because we are so impacted and influenced by this giant superpower that's right to our south. We are so heavily influenced by what's going on in the States, for example, that Pierre Poilievre, P.P. Le Pew, who is basically a Trump wannabe, is infiltrating Canadian morality with a very similar, I'm not really going to provide anything of value, I'm going to lie, and I'm going to convince people that I'm looking out for them, but I'm really not going to provide any value. I'm really just going to criticize everything and anything that the opposition party does. He is the de facto leader of the Conservative Party. He lost his seat in the last federal election, and then basically got reelected into the role. I don't know why they kept this loser instead of trying to get someone who could actually be effective for that Conservative Party and bring the Conservative Party back to respectable party that it used to be. But yeah, he ended up rerunning for a riding in Alberta where it was almost a shoo-in that he was going to win. And anyways, we have a lot of influence in Canada based on the U.S. A lot of our media, a lot of our books, a lot of our music are impacted by the U.S. And there have been, Hockey Night in Canada, I'm pretty sure this was our Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau in the 70s helped CBC, which is Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, television and radio, I should say, and obviously a website now, which is all about Canadian content, kind of like BBC in the UK or NPR potentially in the US. Hockey Night in Canada was instituted, and I grew up on Hockey Night in Canada, and let's be honest, most of the very successful teams that have had the Stanley Cup for decades, most of the players who are amazing players are just Canadians who ended up getting brought into American teams who obviously have a lot more money. And that's the challenge when you're dealing with a superpower that's right to your south, that has a lot more means and a lot more money, is you can be overshadowed by the television, the movies, the literature. So it's always been an important element for us in Canada to define ourselves that way. For example, defining myself as a Canadian author brings incredible value to me as an author, to bookstores, to libraries as well. That's why I always, and I got this from Canadian science fiction author Robert J. Sawyer, who's also been dubbed the Dean of Canadian Science Fiction by the Ottawa Citizen, the newspaper in Ottawa. Rob always taught me to define yourself as a big fish in a small pool, a very important element for success as an author, because when you define yourself as a fish in the ocean, you may not be visible, may not be seen. And I've leveraged that in numerous ways to my advantage, and that's one of the ways I leverage myself as a Canadian author, but then author from Ontario or Southern Ontario or Northern Ontario or Southwestern Ontario or wherever it is I happen to be living at the time as well. I think that's an important, or a local, regional author from the region, etc. So that's an important element. But let's go back to the Canadian content. So Hockey Night in Canada was instituted as a reminder of this great sort of Canadian sport, and there's so many. We had a CanCon rule or a law or whatever it was that was passed for media, for television, for radio, potentially. I wasn't sure if it was for print as well, where 30% of the content that they shared on the radio, that they shared on television, had to be from Canadian sources. So I actually believe that there were numerous musicians and performers that we have and know today that we probably, had we not had a CanCon rule, they may not have prospered. They may not be known. Now Rush, a favorite band of course, it was actually a Cleveland, Ohio radio station. Donna was the DJ who started playing their first album, and I think it was Working Man, which really resonated with folks in Cleveland, and that is what got Rush some popularity, because just being popular in Canada may not be enough to cut it. Even bands like the Tragically Hip who did, and again, there's going to be a lot of Americans who listen to this who go, who? But the Tragically Hip are definitively Canadian power group as well. But again, the success they had in the States, and they did appear on Saturday Night Live, and that was an incredible opportunity for them. So a lot of bands, so think about Bryan Adams, Celine Dion, Shania Twain, Bare Naked Ladies, Corey Hart. Again, I'm going back to some older ones. Even Lawrence Gowan, who's now he's the lead singer with Styx. Gowan was huge in the 80s with a huge hit called Strange Animal. And if I started to play the opening notes of Strange Animal, any Canadian listening to this podcast would go, "Oh my God, I know that song. You're a Strange Animal. That's what I know." But he may not be known at all, even though it was like a number one hit for months in early mid 80s potentially. But there are a lot of folks who would never have heard of him. There was even television shows that are distinctively Canadian. So actually, ironically, Mr. Rogers, and who everyone knows and loves, or most people know and love, Mr. Rogers was good friends with Mr. Dressup, who was the Canadian version of Mr. Rogers, who actually predates Mr. Rogers a little bit, but they were friends. And again, thanks to CBC, Mr. Dressup was where we grew up, and it was all about imagination. And he had this thing called so when I say tickle trunk to a Canadian, they know exactly what I mean, because Mr. Dressup would always dress up, and he would go to his tickle trunk, and he would pull out costumes, and he would pretend. I mean, it was just this incredibly powerful imagination. We had television shows growing up, like we had the Friendly Giant, Look Up, Look Way Up. And I grew up on these shows. Obviously, we had Sesame Street as well. We had the Polka Dot Door, and I think the Polka Dot Door was a Canadian children's show as well. It was kind of like Romper Room, or one of them might be American and the other one's Canadian. I think Polka Dot Door was Canadian. Yeah, Polka Dot Door is Canadian because I remember meeting Pokeroo. And again, Canadians know who Pokeroo is. I remember meeting Poker at Word on the Street years ago, and I was so excited. Pokeroo! But there's so much of this Canadian content. You got television shows like The Beachcomber, Schitt's Creek, obviously recent Canadian content. You've got Corner Gas, more recent-ish the show. You've got the Trailer Park Boys, Letterkenny, well-known in the States, obviously, and Shoresy, obviously spin-off of that. But so many other great programs. So, for example, I'm going to, bear with me here, there's a voice that keeps on calling me, and I know some Canadian listeners will go, "Oh my God, I know where he's going with this." The Littlest Hobo, a show about a dog, the breed of the dog is escaping me, kind of a police dog, who was basically a traveler, a wandering traveler who would meet people along the way and solve various crimes. It was a huge Canadian show, and I'm gonna without music to accompany me, if I played the opening of that song, so many Canadians would know this song. There's a voice that keeps on calling me down the road, that's where I'll always be. Every stop I make a new friend. Can't stay for long, just turn around and I'm gone again. Maybe tomorrow I'll wanna settle down. Until tomorrow I'll just keep moving on. Until tomorrow the whole world is my home. So that song called Maybe Tomorrow is a very Canadian song. Again, kind of like Strange Animal, you hear that song and you know exactly what you're in for. But we wouldn't know, as Canadians, we wouldn't know this content unless we had the CanCon broadcasting law or rule or whatever it was that ensured that 30% of the things that were played were from Canadian artists, were from Canadian creators. And I benefit so much from CanCon. So, for example, again, the opportunity. So many publishers in Canada get grants from Canadian publishers. It is a combination of the Canada Council for the Arts and the Writers Union of Canada that petitioned to bring public lending right to bring the public lending right to Canada under Public Lending Rights Canada, so that Canadian authors can get money for their books appearing in Canadian libraries, which is an important way to support it. They also, Canada Council for the Arts is the entity who purchases ISBNs from Bowker, the International Institute that releases ISBNs, so that we Canadian authors and Canadian publishers don't have to pay for ISBNs. They get them courtesy of Canada Council for the Arts. It's a way, one of the many incredible ways that they support the culture here. I got a grant years ago with one of my books that was published through Dundurn. Dundurn hooked me up with a grant to pay for me to go to Halifax, Nova Scotia, on Canada's East Coast, to participate as an author for their Word of the Street in Halifax. I love Halifax so much. I love the East Coast. Hell, I love pretty much everywhere I've been to in Canada. But that was through a grant through, I think it was a combination of Ontario Arts Council and Canada Council for the Arts, and even with many of the books that I've published through Canadian publishers, I know were supported by Ontario Arts Council, Canada Council for the Arts, other provinces as well. I've been involved in projects in Alberta. They're very generous to their artists in that province, or at least they were in the past, very generous for the arts. And even a book that I have coming out next year, I'm getting obviously an advance for the book from the publisher, but I'm also I received a grant to do research and to help pay for some of the travel of getting through the various Great Lakes, etc., for writing about ghost stories of the Great Lakes. And again, about probably 50% of the content of the book
There's construction ahead.
will be Canadian. So many things that support us as Canadians are just so important. If you're a Canadian author, by the way, if you have not signed up for, and I say this every February, put a note in your calendar to sign up for public lending rights. Whether your book is published with a traditional publisher or whether you self-published, it doesn't matter. You register your ebook, your print book, your audio book. You register your books with Public Lending Right Canada, and they do a random sampling of those ISBNs every year, and they run a different selection of libraries every year, and every time they find one of your ISBNs, you get money for that, and that's kind of like to make up for lost royalties. And I don't see my books being in libraries as lost royalties. I see them as opportunities for everyone to have access to my books, which I think is just so important. I even regularly donate books to the library, because even if I were to pay full retail to donate them to the library, I'm going to more than make up for that if that book gets picked up in the annual survey that they do. But every year I get several thousands of dollars from this program, which I think is amazing. And again, it's born out of CanCon. It's born out of that support for the Canadian arts, which I think is just so critical. And I guess perhaps because we're in this small, and I say small by population, the population of Canada is roughly the same as the population of the state of California, and that's all of us, all across Canada. Many of us, the majority of the population, huddled near the 49th parallel, huddled in the warmer part of the country as well. And but again, that population spread across this beautiful country of ours is relatively small. So the power that we have is relatively small. So we need that support. It's almost like when you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's a very similar thing. If we didn't have Canadian content regulations, there would be so many Canadian artists and musicians and writers and creators whose work would not have been able to stand the test of time. And that's a very similar thing when you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, is that without given this equity opportunity, there are some voices, there are some creators, there are some people in various industries who are as equally talented and skilled and hardworking, but would not be given the same opportunity, would not have been able to rise into different positions and achieve certain things. And so I do believe in DEI. I do believe in CanCon. I do believe that it's so important to ensure diverse voices are available for people to listen to attend to learn from, to grow from as well. I've definitely benefited from, basically, CanCon is a DEI program. When you think about it, it's allowed these voices to come forth. And so when I see publishers who are looking for own voices and looking to be diverse in their publications, as a cisgender heterosexual white male, I could take the stance of, oh gee, I guess there's no opportunity for me anymore, without realizing that I've always had all the opportunity. But putting it in the context of a Canadian author who maybe needed that support, can recognize that there are other creators who need that support too. And that's one of the reasons why I believe in these programs. And so I'm very grateful, as I'm on my way to CanCon in Ottawa and stopped in traffic right now, and the highway's completely shut down for, I think it's single lane now because of the construction, so we're just kind of waiting for the other guys to go so we can kind of go. Who knows? But at least I have several hours to go. But in any case, that's what I wanted to share. I wanted to talk a little bit about CanCon. I wanted to reflect on my involvement, my benefit from CanCon. And oh look, there was a underlying message, and I didn't even realize when I started talking about this, I didn't even realize that I was going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's so interesting that I had no plan. I was pantsing this entire podcast. I had no plan that I was going to connect CanCon and the Canadian broadcasting laws for Canadian content or regulations. I had no idea that it was going to lead back to the importance, and that's one of the reasons why, I guess subliminally, why I always believed in DEI, is because I benefited from it myself as a Canadian author. I hope potentially, especially if you've been listening to some of the poison that's been spit out into the world about the evils of DEI, hopefully, potentially hearing my version or my talk or ramblings about the importance of Canadian content, hopefully that's helped you understand why that's important, because you could potentially see it from a different perspective, a perspective that's not as maybe foreign, and I use air quotes when I say that, not as foreign or as different, and maybe that'll help you, and hopefully it does, and I know it helped me. So that is it for this rambling reflection from the road, as yay, I get to move forward at 20 kilometers an hour as we slowly make our way through this construction zone on the highway. I am, as always, Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and as always, I'm so very, very glad that you are listening to this podcast. I am going to do my best to remove the extra noise from the road from this broadcast, but we'll see what we can do. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode or other episodes, feel free to share this episode with someone that you think would get value from it, some benefit from this episode or any other episode. That's a great way to say thank you. And speaking of thank you, I do want to say a huge shout out and a huge thanks to all of those who support this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections, as well as those coffee buddies of mine who support me at buymeacoffee.com/Mark Leslie. I do greatly appreciate your support. So until next week and until next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, who's very eager to spend the next almost 3 hours of my drive listening to Terry Follis on the audiobook, reading The Marionette, which just came out this week. Until next week and next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, who's going to be enjoying that book, wishing you great writing and good Stark reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. So we've heard from a lot of you asking about short fiction, specifically how authors are, actually making money and building real fan loyalty with it.
Yeah, not just seeing it as a hobby, but as a real business tool.
Exactly. So if you're looking for the definitive strategy for using shorter work, and we mean anything under, 40,000 words?
Yeah.
As a critical part of your publishing plan, well, this deep dive is definitely for you.
That's right. Our mission today is pretty clear. We want to extract the practical strategies, the real nuts and bolts of generating income and building that reader connection using short form work.
Okay.
We're going to map out how it all fits together, and honestly, it's a lot more complex, but also, I think, more rewarding than most people realize.
And to help frame this, the sources brought up this fantastic metaphor, the short tack. What do they mean by that exactly?
For anyone who doesn't sail, imagine you're in a narrow channel sailing against the wind. You have to make these quick, sharp turns back and forth. Those are tacks. Doing lots of them fast is the short tack.
Okay, it makes sense. Rapid adjustments.
Precisely. And the metaphor works because short fiction lets authors make those same rapid adjustments. You can test a new genre, see how readers react, navigate the shifts in the market.
Which is always changing.
Always. It's a constant challenge if you're only focused on novels, which are, slow and deliberate projects. Short fiction gives you that agility.
That flexibility really feels like the immediate aha moment here. Because the market conditions right now are actually, pretty good for shorter work.
They really are. I mean, think about it. We're all living faster lives. Readers often want something they can finish on the train or over coffee.
Or waiting for the kids, yeah.
Exactly. The sources had a great way of putting it. A novel is a feast, but short fiction is a satisfying snack.
I like that. Feast versus snack.
And if you only serve the feast, maybe you only feed your readers once a year, maybe less. But if you offer snacks too, you can keep feeding them, keep your name out there.
So let's define that snack menu then. When we talk short fiction, it's a pretty wide range, right? Under 40,000 words covers a lot.
It really does.
Yeah.
And we can break it down using the standard SFWA guidelines.
Yeah.
You've got your short story that's up to about 7,500 words.
Okay.
The novelette, which goes up to 17,500. And the novella, the longest, hitting that 40,000 word mark.
And we shouldn't forget the really short stuff either.
Definitely not. Microfiction, like under 300 words, even drabbles, which are exactly 100 words. They all have potential uses.
That range is powerful. But let's rewind a bit. Why now? Why is this such a favorable current? Because for ages, the wisdom was short fiction just doesn't pay.
Yeah, and that wisdom has roots. Think back past the 1950s. The traditional magazine market for short stories, it was huge. It launched massive careers.
Right, the golden age stuff.
Exactly. Estimates say there were maybe 12,000 paying slots a year back then. When that whole ecosystem collapsed, the perception stuck. Short fiction isn't a viable career path.
But then came digital, like a defibrillator, you said.
Pretty much. Two big things happened. First, digital publishing costs plummeted. Suddenly, niche genre magazines, anthologies, they could exist again without huge print runs.
And that opened doors for more voices too, right?
Absolutely. More diverse voices, marginalized authors found new venues. Second, e-readers, instant access. No need to hunt down a magazine stand. Content is just taps away. Perfect for those short bursts of reading time.
And here's the key insight why we're calling this uncrowded waters. Despite the tech, despite reader habits, the market for short fiction is still way less saturated than the novel market. especially for indie authors.
And the reason for that gap? It seems to be author perception. Authors just aren't seeing the strategic value, the reuse potential. They're so focused on the novel, high-risk, slow production.
Meaning there's a real need out there, an underserved audience for quality short stuff, waiting for authors who get the short tack idea.
Exactly, which brings us back to speed.
Right. An 8,000-word story might take, what, a tenth of the time of an 80,000-word novel?
Easily. Mostly because the plotting is just less complex, fewer subplots, fewer characters maybe.
And that speed cuts the risk, doesn't it?
Hugely. You can dip your toe into a totally new genre, test out a world-building idea, try a new character voice, all with a short story before you sink years into a full novel based on it.
It's like a low-risk R&D department for your writing.
That's a great way to put it, the ultimate research model.
But, and this is a big but from the sources, faster cannot mean lower quality.
Oh, absolutely critical. Whether you're selling it for cash or giving it away to build your list, it has to be polished, professional, error-free.
Because it represents your whole brand, essentially. Every piece does.
It does. One bad experience can lose a reader forever.
Okay, so let's dive into the core strategies now. Generating income, what we're calling the significant game. The sources identified two main goals here, making money, obviously, and connecting with readers. Let's hit the money first.
Okay, so the traditional market. The standard pro rate, SFWA rate, is currently $0.08 a word in the U.S.
8 cents a word. So even a fairly long short story, say 10,000 words, that's $800. Nice, but maybe not life-changing on its own.
Right, you're probably not getting rich just from single story sales.
Yeah.
But the value of that traditional route isn't just the upfront cash, it's the cachet it brings.
Cachet, meaning what exactly? Credibility, visibility.
Both. Getting published in a well-regarded magazine or anthology gives you instant credibility. It leads to reviews, great marketing quotes for your novels, maybe even consideration for big awards like the Pushcart Prize or the O. Henry.
And that award recognition is gold when you're selling your next book, your novel.
Absolutely invaluable. So the strategy there is straightforward. Aim high first. Submit to the top-paying, most prestigious markets. Then work your way down the list if needed.
Makes sense. But the sources stress that relying only on that isn't the smartest business move.
No, the really savvy approach is diversification. Think like a business. Your short fiction is an asset. The mantra should be, create it once, then publish and promote it everywhere you possibly can.
Everywhere. Okay, how? Grouping stories seems key here. Anthologies and collections.
Exactly. Let's take anthologies first. Those collections with stories from different authors. Their power comes from cross-promotion.
Ah, because every author in it tells their own fans.
Right. So the book gets marketed to the combined fan bases of everyone involved. That dramatically boosts your reach and your potential income much faster than a standalone story could.
Now, the payment models here differ, don't they? Traditional versus indie.
They do. Traditionally, you might get a flat fee, an upfront payment for one-time use of the story. In the indie space, though, royalty splits are much more common.
And the sources give this incredible example comparing the two. Really eye-opening.
Yeah, the 2113. Stories inspired by the Music of Russia anthology. One author got paid $265 upfront for their story. Decent payday for short fiction, right?
But sure, $265 is $265.
The sources did some projection. Based on that book's steady sales over years, if that author had negotiated a royalty split instead, say just 5%, they could have earned something like $8,750 over the book's life so far.
Wait, hold on. From $265 up front to potentially almost $9,000 over time.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that single data point just completely reframes how you should think about the long-term value of even a short piece.
It really does. It shows how vital retaining those ongoing revenue rights can be. It's the long tail. That could be part of your retirement plan. Seriously.
It's transformative thinking. And that flexibility also applies to collections, right? Which are stories by the same author.
Correct. You can take stories you've already published elsewhere, maybe ones where you only sold first rights, and repackage them. Create themed digital chapbooks, maybe, like Snowman Shivers, 2 dark humor tales for the holidays. You leverage your reprint rights.
Which we'll definitely talk more about rights in a bit. Standalone ebooks are also an option using indie publishing platforms.
Very viable. And this is where the C's of indie publishing come in, according to the sources.
Okay, let's quickly define those C's. They seem important for the income side.
Right, they are. Creativity, you write what you want. Control, you set the price, the distribution. Chronology, you can time releases perfectly, like hitting a holiday window. And cash.
Cash meaning?
Meaning low upfront costs. Things like ISBNs for short ebooks are cheap or even free sometimes. So even if the income per story is small, it could be steady and the initial investment is minimal.
One author mentioned earned nearly $700 from their suspense shorts. But, $700 over what time frame? Does that really cover the editing, the cover, the time?
That's a fair question. The sources are clear. It wasn't overnight money. It accrued over several years. But the crucial point is asset creation. Once that short story is out there, polished and published, it's an evergreen asset.
Evergreen, meaning it just keeps potentially earning.
Exactly. Passive income with almost zero extra work year after year. Compare that to a novel that might take you 5 years to write before it earns anything. It's a different way of thinking about the labor involved.
Okay, that reframes it.
No.
But the money is only half the equation. The sources argue the real long-term win might be the reader relationship.
Yes. Let's talk about short fiction as your business card, how you use it to connect.
And often that means giving it away for free, right?
Often, yes. But there are two main strategies for free content, and it's really important to know the difference. First up is the reader funnel.
The funnel, where does that live primarily?
Primarily on retail sites like Amazon, Kobo, Apple Books. You might need to use price matching to get it free on Amazon, but the goal is visibility and offering a taste test.
So like a prequel story or an origin story, something that sets expectations for your main series.
Exactly. It shows readers your style, your genre. The visibility on the retail site itself helps funnel them towards your paid books. Think Mark Leslie's Prospero's Ghost example.
Okay, so that's the funnel. What's the second strategy?
The reader magnet. This lives primarily on your author website or maybe a landing page. The goal here is direct list building.
Capturing email addresses.
Precisely. You offer exclusive free content, maybe bonus scenes, character backstories, deleted chapters, but only in exchange for the reader signing up for your mailing list.
And controlling that email list is publishing gold, isn't it?
It's everything. You can't rely on Amazon's algorithms or Facebook's whims. They change the rules constantly.
Yeah.
Your email list, that's your direct channel to your most dedicated fans. You own that relationship.
The sources mentioned co-authoring a free story like Blood of the Wicked as a magnet. That seems smart. Introduce your fans to another author they might like, and vice versa.
Yeah, a great way to cross-pollinate audiences and both build your lists. It's mutually beneficial.
And connection isn't just text anymore, is it? Authors are getting creative.
Definitely. We saw examples of authors reading short fiction live on Facebook or YouTube. That boosts engagement, gives readers a personal connection.
And it helps with SEO too, right? Search engines like video.
Big time. Then there are things like location-based apps.
Oh yeah, the Squirrel app example. Tying story locations in New York to real places for a Canadian werewolf in New York. That's cool.
Or using Voice Map for guided audio tours based on book research. It pulls the fiction out into the real world, makes it tangible.
And we have to loop back to market research here, using short fiction as that small-scale test model.
It's such a powerful, low-commitment way to test things. Before you spend years on a novel, write a short story in that world, with that character. See if it resonates.
What kind of feedback are you looking for? Just sales or?
Not just sales, especially if it's free. You're testing core viability. Is there an audience for this specific genre blend? Do readers connect with this protagonist? Is the concept intriguing?
Like the Evasion example, posting a first draft novel on Wattpad.
Exactly. The overwhelming reader response there showed massive demand before the author invested heavily in professional editing, cover design, and marketing for the official launch. It de-risked the whole novel project.
Which brings us perfectly to our last section, critical best practices. Let's call it sailing smoothly. These are the non-negotiables, whether you're focused on income or connection, and the number one thing.
Rights licensing. Without a doubt. This is the absolute foundation for making short fiction work for you long-term, especially for income. Get this wrong, and you're leaving serious money on the table.
You mentioned that mind-blowing example earlier, the story browsers.
Right. Sold first in 1999, because the author understood rights and retained the right to resell it after the first publication.
They sold or repackaged that same story. How many times?
8 times. Over 25 years. Across different formats, print anthologies, audio versions, digital collections, international editions.
8 times from one story. Okay, that fact alone should make every single author listening pause and rethink their contracts.
It's the difference between a one-off payment and a potential lifelong income stream from a single asset. You absolutely must avoid granting exclusive rights indefinitely or across all formats. Define the license narrowly.
And the sources broke down the key dimensions of rights you need to specify.
Yes, 5 key things. Media. Is it for ebook only? Print, audio, film. Language, English only. Other languages. Territory, North America. World. Specific countries. Occurrence? Are you selling first rights the first time it appears anywhere? Or reprint rights, second, third, etc.? And term, how long does the publisher hold these specific rights? 1 year. 5 years. Life of copyright.
Be specific on all 5, because the reuse potential is where the magic happens.
That's where the short tack strategy really pays off over time. Retain those subsequent rights.
Okay, let's switch perspective. Getting your story accepted in the first place, the view from the editors or the contest judges' side, what are they looking for?
Honestly, they're often looking for reasons to reject. They get swamped with submissions, many of them technically good, so any small mistake can be the reason yours gets cut.
So tip number 1, assess your own submission realistically.
Yes. Is it actually a complete story? Does it have a beginning, middle, end, some kind of resonance? Or is it just a cool idea you rushed out? Don't submit half-baked work.
Tip 2, follow the rules, like really follow them.
To the letter. Unambiguously. If the word count limit is 1,500 words, 1,501 is out. If they ask for 12-point Times New Roman, don't send courier.
Why is that so critical? Seems minor.
Because ignoring guidelines instantly marks you as unprofessional. It suggests you either didn't read them or don't care. Why would they trust you with their publication if you can't follow simple instructions? It's an easy first cut for them.
Fair enough. And tip 3, the obvious one.
Make it clean. Proofread meticulously. Typos that basic spell check or grammar software should catch. Fatal errors. They have plenty of clean manuscripts to choose from. Don't give them an easy reason to say no.
Sound advice. Finally, polishing the vessel itself, the editing. The sources really hammered home reading your work aloud.
Oh, it's crucial. It forces you to slow down. You catch things your eyes just skip over when reading silently. Awkward phrasing, repetitive sentence structures.
Content errors too, like that example of 21st century office buildings in a 1999 flashback. Easy to miss silently.
Exactly. And listening via text-to-speech software adds another layer. It gives you distance, objectivity, helps you catch weird dialogue, or those author tics like, does every character sigh constantly?
And because short fiction is, well, shorter, getting professional editing is often more affordable than for a novel, right?
It's much more affordable. So there's really less excuse to skip that final professional polish before you submit it or publish it yourself.
It all comes back to professionalism and treating it like a core part of the business.
Absolutely. The short tack strategy works because it allows for speed and flexibility, but quality underpins everything.
Well, this has been a really illuminating deep dive. It's clear short fiction is way more than just a nice-to-have. It's a powerful, versatile tool.
Definitely. A foundational strategy really for diversifying income through smart rights management and for building those deep reader connections with strategic free content.
We've seen how it lets you test ideas, create multiple income streams, build that all-important mailing list.
All while giving readers content in a format they increasingly seem to want. It hits on all cylinders.
So let's leave our listeners with one final thought, circling back to that sailing metaphor, the short tack. The sources shared some nautical advice.
Yeah, it was something like, if your main engine ever dies out at sea, knowing how to short tack might just save you.
And parallel for authors.
Maybe the most important benefit of mastering short fiction isn't just the income or the connection, valuable as they are. Maybe it's creative recovery.
Creative recovery? How so?
When the engine on your big novel project dies, you hit writer's block, burnout, lose faith in the idea. Switching gears to write and finish a short story can be incredibly restorative.
You get that sense of completion. Immediate gratification.
Exactly. It lets you try something new, play around, regain momentum, maybe even discover the fix for the novel. In that sense, the short tack isn't just about speed, it's the engine repair kit. It's what keeps the whole voyage going when the main engine sputters.